And we're back. We're going to move talking about solutions.
Nice.
We presented 4 problems right at the end of our last session. Social deprivation, I'm against it generally.
Yes.
Sleep deprivation, also bad. Attention fragmentation and addiction. But to move toward, okay, so what should we do about it? So we will obviously propose Jonathan Haidt's suggestions and just kind of talk about from a Christian perspective, okay, so what do you do about these issues? So then, first reform, no smartphones before high school. He says we should give our kids basic text and call only phones until they're 14 years old. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, why does a kid need to access Facebook, YouTube? If you're like, well, a kid needs a phone because he's, going off somewhere, and if he gets in a situation, he needs to call home. You want to be able to, or her to be able to text or, call, which is fair. My daughter, who's 10, Maggie, has asked for a phone a few times because her friends have one, or someone from school has one, and Lincoln, our 8-year-old son, has also, because they like to play on our phones, and I do think, and this gets into, if adults' lives are very fixated on their phones, then they kind of see, oh, well, I want the access that they have. They have this phone that has, you're kind of a gamer. You probably have games on your phone that your kids like to play, want to play. And so they want to, take that phone, watch YouTube videos, or play. My son loves playing games on my phone. He's like, can I see your phone, Dad? I want to play a game. Can I play a game? Can I play a game? Can I play? And you're just constantly battling this kid who wants to play a game, mostly because he's bored, right? He's not outside. Maybe it's raining, or he just wants to sit around and play a game on a phone. And so the parent can either say, just to kind of get you off my back, and I want to kind of do my own thing, and you're bothering me, take my phone, play your game, no big deal. Mm-hmm. But, for the kid, there's plenty of things they can do outside. There's toys everywhere. They can, use their imaginations and, come up with stories and these type of things, and actually enter into these new worlds of their own creation, which is a good thing, right? You prevent them from doing that if you just simply give them a phone. So I think, for parents, is there any real reason they need a phone? Like, they don't have a car, they can't drive anywhere. So why would they ever need to call you? If they're around another parent, like they're going to a friend's house, can't they use the phone there if they need to call home? And most of the time, I know in our situation, I don't know if your kids, our kids go to a bunch of birthday parties, right? So you take them somewhere, they don't have a phone,
right?
But 99% of the time, we have the phone number for the parents that are doing the party.
Yep.
So you text the parent, or you call the parent, hey, when do we need to pick them up? And that's the way it should work. There's no need for the kids to have something where there's plenty of ways they can contact you if, they need to.
Yeah, so there's a flaw immediately that it's like as phones have presented themselves as a smartphone, let's just say as the iPhone or these other versions have,
which is really not
themselves.
A phone. It's like it's secondary function, or even tertiary function.
It's
a camera. Watch any phone ad, it's all camera related.
Multi-faceted communication device.
Right.
So we then seem to make a jump to assume things like, I don't need to trust those other parents. I can just get information directly from my kids. I can just have a continual connection directly with my kids. And if we had stepped back, 2007, whatever, when the iPhone comes out as a benchmark, and said, so wait, am I right then that I don't need social trust anymore?
Right.
Well, we would have clearly said, no, that's wrong. Because as we're all aware, somebody could still hurt your child even if they have a phone in their hand.
Right.
Like, it doesn't stop that.
Right.
But we have liked this feeling of, oh, well, at least they could immediately call me. Yeah. And given what we know about social trust, we still use most of our means to tell whether or not people are trustworthy. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, there's phones around. Means of communication is not a problem
Right.
now. It's just we made in this regard, we just made an immediate false conclusion about, well, maybe we don't need kind of social trust, or maybe this can solve and enhance this situation. And anyone who has had a child knows, no, it's not as if they're just always going to tell you the truth about what happens in various situations, or that they are even going to tell you the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
This one, in thinking about this, and I'll go ahead and say all four, and we'll keep on with number one here for a bit. So one was no smartphones before high school. Number two, no social media before 16. Number three, phone-free schools, which there's a lot of talk about that one right now. And then number four, far more unsupervised play and childhood independence. The smartphone, like you said, we have not done ourselves a favor by calling it a phone, because it is dramatically different than the, it makes me think about the black rotary phone at my grandparents' house that was there. That's kind of like the central phone of my childhood. So if I was introduced to a phone, we all know that the things we're holding and carrying in our pockets are dramatically different from that. But what's strange about what we've done, the first analogy that comes to my mind is what we did in 2007 or so, is we're given this toolbox, and when you open that toolbox, what you found in there was like a jackhammer and a sawzall and a nail gun, and also like a bulldozer. And I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's all in there. And then we were like, man, this thing is awesome. It can do everything. What should we do with it? We should give one to everybody. Yeah. If you can afford it, buy yourself that thing. And then we're surprised, one, when a 5-year-old comes up and is like, I've heard there's a toolbox that has a bulldozer in it. I want one. And then we're like, man, they ask me about this every day. And then we cave on it. Yeah. At the very least, what I'm saying is, boy, you ought to think a lot about when failures happen with that, when you're caving on it, what you're really giving to your child. Because those apps, the various applications that you have, people cannot handle. Young people, adults cannot handle all of those evenly, in a very similar way that when you get a jackhammer in your hand, if you've never used one, well, it's going to do some things you probably didn't expect.
Yeah.
And you may not handle that well.
Right.
But that's what we've done.
Yes.
I mean, that to me is a very good, simple analogy for what we continue to do.
Yeah, and I do feel, I think Apple has tried to, and they provided these different functions like that you could grayscale your phone, right, where you remove the color, so that they can give you that dopamine as well. Yeah. They have like the time limit, right?
Yeah.
Where you can restrict certain apps with a passcode, and so I think in some ways you can get that report where it's like how much you're on your phone, right? Is always a depressing piece of information about yourself. It's like, wow, I guess I was on my phone more than I should be, right? And so, I mean, even adults, and I think you made that point, adults struggle. Mm-hmm. So if adults struggle with discipline with that piece of technology, well, what do you think a child is going to do who struggle with discipline, right? They don't eat right. They don't do their homework when they're supposed to. This is like typical kids. I mean, there are outliers on both sides, but that's the majority of children. Like, they just struggle with discipline, right? And they need parenting for their own sake. And so to just give something like that over to them without any restrictions is, adults shouldn't be given a phone like that without any restrictions. Even like I notice people who are, I don't know if you have this observations, but you're like in a store, and it could be a hardware store, it could be any store, and you notice that people are on their phones that are working there. You're like, that's probably not a good thing.
Right.
They're constantly on their phones, and especially with like an Apple Watch. You would think with the watch, you could just check to see if you got a message or something with your watch, but then you have to you're always on your phone scrolling because you're bored at work. Yeah. And you're not really doing what you're being paid to do. And you see this even construction workers, like you're driving by and you see these construction workers like sitting there on their phones. I see it constantly. They're like sitting there just on their phones, and you're like, wow, we're so addicted to this, and these are adults. Yep. So what do you think a child will be?
Right. And so when you say that adults shouldn't be allowed this, you're not speaking from a government perspective. You're speaking as a Christian. We know then that I have to discipline myself.
Right.
With everything that I have in my life. I cannot just trust myself and go, well, I keep my limits. I know my limits and I keep myself within my limits. It's like, no, that's why you have to have self-control, because we are all prone to not keep ourselves within healthy limits. Right. And so then what is parenting? It is handing down wisdom in terms of courage and in terms of self-control and discipline and many other things. That's what parenting is handing down as best as you can, imperfectly, the self-restraint, the guidelines for children on, hey, things threaten to try to overtake you. Many kinds of things do, and this is how you need to limit yourself. And so that's why that needs to be talked about. You just told me your oldest child is 10, right? And my oldest is 8. And so this is a great time for us to be considering this. And I know we're going to be heard by parents who have older kids, and we're going to be heard by people who don't have any kids. We might even be heard by young people themselves who are going like, well, you don't understand how important this is. Yeah. It is a big deal in our times. And this is a thing that we as humanity, people, have not sorted out wise courses of action, like the wisest ways to handle these devices that we've been given. But this statement that text and call only phones are useful for all of us in various times. Sure. I envision a future where it's much easier to, like right now we have airplane mode on our phones. And it's just kind of like, all right, phone, leave me alone. Yeah. But if there were a slide device on our phones that went from, hey, I'm completely open, like I'm just hanging out, sitting on my couch. So if anybody wants to call me, text me, I'm surfing.
I'm available.
Yes.
Yeah.
All sliding all the way down to, no, I'm doing my best right now to focus on something. So if this is not top level, please don't just leave me alone completely. These are not options that we generally have right now. Right. And that's only because it has not been a priority for us. And that's a big problem. Yeah. It needs to be a priority for all of us. Right. And it is concerning to me to think about young people who have never known what it's like to be left alone. In that room you were talking about earlier, to have lived your entire life in a room full of you and the internet and people just constantly tapping you on the shoulder and never have known a moment of peace. Right. A moment where you can go, wow, it's really quiet. Mm-hmm. I can kind of take in the voices. So at the very least, about number one here, I would like to say we should all be considering this. Mm-hmm. We should all be considering what apps should be on our phone, what apps should be we'd allow, give us notifications and say things to us to jump right smack in the middle of our time of focus, of our time where we're trying to be present with other people, a time where we're trying to study, or a time where we're trying to accomplish anything else other than being available to what our phones might want to do to us. Why don't you take number 2, Matt?
So the social media, no social media before 16. When preteens are subject to endless, that's a very difficult word.
Yeah, algorithmically.
Chosen content and comparisons with influencer, it can damage their self-worth permanently. This is probably my bigger. I hate social media. I think it's worthless. I really just think it's the scum of the earth. I just can't stand it, and it is very much like, I feel like it's like filled with mostly like women and photos of their like children and vacations, and then like very extreme political view people. Like I feel like that is all that it is.
This is one of the things I love about doing a podcast, because I've totally been where you are. I'm on a temporary hiatus, but complete your thought.
Yeah, and it drives me up the wall. To a point where I don't have it on my phone, so I can't get on any social media on my phone. I have to get out my computer and pull it up. And I'll say I'm just as prone to scrolling as anyone. I do find like comedy videos or just stupid videos of people. I mean, those are, they do fill time.
Sure.
So I'm prone as anyone, and I do feel like that's all that it is. It's just like content that is meaningless. And that's why I think and this gets into like AI in particular and I know that some people have written on, I know Table Talk, like Ligonier talked about the importance of like legitimately creating things, right? Creating, which you're reflecting God in this creation of things. That there's a goodness to that. When we are just kind of artificially creating things, it's not. You could tell like there's something off about it, and it's not something we should be consuming ourselves with just artificial content that's so easily created without any type of thoughts or history or background being put into creating things. And so I just don't care for it. I think Facebook is at one point was created for people to connect with each other. Now, like, you have all these friends, and some of them are friends from high school, college, and you still don't really talk to them.
Yes.
And it went to a point where, you can message someone and they won't message you back because they were like, I haven't talked to that person in years. Why would I message them back? So even like to that point, I can't remember if I've ever connected with someone who we shared a similar passion for something where Facebook brought us together. I can't think of anything. And I know that's what it was created to be. I tend to be very critical of like its purpose. It's obviously a $1 billion company now. It's basically to its core. If you want to ask like what is Facebook, it's a marketing company. People use it for, number one, they collect data on people and they sell that to the highest bidder. So political ads, companies who are selling you stuff. Where do you think that came from? It came from social media. Yeah. So what you're basically doing is presenting to them what you like, and then all these companies and buying that data and then selling you stuff. And it's like, again, you don't want people knocking on your door trying to sell you something. But what we've done is we've allowed ourselves to be sold to constantly.
Right. We have someone sitting at our kitchen table, seeing us walk by on our way to the bathroom, seeing us. Hey, by the way, as you're going, you want to buy some bubbles? You want some bubbles for your kids? Your kids like bubbles.
Well, you do have something coming up. I do want some bubbles, right?
There you go.
You're like, did you really need them? And so we are social media in its core, and even Google. I mean, they're selling the search engine data to companies so they could sell you stuff. That's in its essence what it is.
Well, and I'll complete this negative side by saying that I do see a big problem on social media as someone coming out saying, I got a big problem with a person who's talking to me about an issue. Let's say like other people don't mow their lawns. I hate that. And my neighbor, he doesn't mow his lawn so much that it's dropping all his limbs in my yard and all his weeds are getting over in my yard. Man, doesn't everybody hate irresponsible people? And then it's just like, get ready, everybody. Pile on time.
Yeah.
Here's my story about what's happened to me. And I'm using a lower level. I know this is not common, but we all know things that are much more common, deeper, complex. I've heard a friend of mine say recently, if you want to see things that people will get fired up about, their kids and their money. It's like, yes, look at the intersection of things where people are talking about kids and money and see them get upset about somebody who did something to them. Okay, so to go back to a lighter subject on their lawns, that then we have a whole bunch of people piling on to complain about other irresponsible people. And what is the end of this matter? Nothing. That we end up with 47 complaints, depending on your number of followers. And then, I mean, the world ends with a whimper in this way. Like
somebody you're going to get an ad for a lawn
care company. That your stinking do-nothing neighbor won't pay for. So, yes, it reminds me of the end of the world ending with a whimper, not with a bang. Just kind of like somebody comes on there and is like, you guys don't understand. My lawn's harder than anybody else. Like, you know what? Forget it. I don't want to argue with you. Let's just this is a big problem. Now then, let me switch gears. As in the Lord's providence, what he has done is I have joined I didn't even realize that it had a social media component when I started it, but I purposefully in the last couple of weeks have gone, all right, I'm going to try this out. And this is a thing called Strava, and here I am promoting a product, but not really. Just it's something that I'm doing right now. None of y'all have to do it. It doesn't make a difference to me. So it's Strava, and it's I have this little belt that I can put my phone in when I run. And so for that time only, it can track me while I'm running. And then when you get rid of it, the settings are such that it can't track me anymore. And then there's different people that I know who use this program and also run, and I can just see what they did today. And it's not really emphasizing interaction beyond just kind of like,
as if you need to know that information.
you don't, but it's fun to know, right?
Yes.
I'm often up early and I do this, and it's like, hey, look at that. My doctor who I grew up with, like my doctor as a kid, he's running. He's retired, but he runs, and it's like, hey, look at that. He's a friend of mine on there, and so I see what he does. He sees what I do, and it's like, hey, okay. And it's very experimental to me. This is what's fun about this. These are experiments that I could end tomorrow if it doesn't go well, and I think that's how we ought to be about all these kinds of things. If you can't make a judgment of whether or not, if you don't know how to look at one of these tools, at one of these apps, and to go, what is that doing for me on a positive side? What is that doing for me on a negative side? And you don't have the capacity to cut yourself off from it. I'm going to tell you right now, do everything you can to cut yourself off from it. Because these are not things that we are able often to be clear-headed about.
No.
We're not able to kind of sit back. In fact, again, they've designed them in ways to make you say, hey, what's happening on there? Don't you think there's probably people doing interesting things that you don't know about? They are designed in that way. And
I want kids, I want kids, especially my kids, to be able, if someone came up to them and said, hey, I heard you went to California. How was that?
Mm-hmm.
And they're able to articulate what it was like. Sure. Not like, well, I posted it on Facebook. You can go look at that.
Yeah.
Like, that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want them to be able to say the same to someone else. Hey, I heard you went to Tokyo recently. What was it like? Yeah. Show me some pictures.
Sure.
Oh, we can go check it on Facebook.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm right here.
Yeah, sure.
Why don't you just show me? And then you can actually present like, oh, this is when we were here. This is when we were there. And it's such a better experience when you're there in person to be able to explain to them what you experienced, what you enjoy, people that you met, than to just post it on social media without any context, without any facial expressions, with anything, and say, oh, look at my life. Look at my journeys. Isn't it amazing? And it's like, well, I don't really care because it's not personal. It's not, I'm not really like drawn into it because I'm not seeing your joy and how you experience that. It's just kind of this statical, like, here you go, like, look, and then go and then ignore it after you've seen it, and then look on something else, and then it almost look. And what we've done is to say, look, but then like we quickly move on to something else.
Yeah, and I really want to zero in on why this is a problem for, say, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds. At that age, let's just, for me, it was junior high or middle school, right? What is happening as a young person is you are trying to look around and go, okay, what am I able to do? Mm-hmm. And in what ways am I pretty competent? What ways am I sort of struggling?
Right.
In what ways am I strong, or in what ways am I attractive? In what ways am I socially? Am I funny? Am I fun to be around? Am I, you talked about that earlier, am I awkward? What do I need to work on? Yeah. What am I already doing pretty well at? And this leads you to, the things that we can all remember from that time, which is, okay, so should I join the basketball team? Should I try to act in plays? Should I really, if I'm good at math, should I really try to get, develop these skills over those? But what social media does is it abstracts out to a broad range of people who aren't around you,
right, necessarily.
And then it says, compare yourself
yes.
to all these people. But by the way, what are they doing? Well, they're putting their best moments. So these people are putting generally their best moments, whether that's an Instagram picture, which has been doctored or, filtered, or here's my best news I've had this week about how well I did on, this test or on in this wrestling match or whatever you want to say. But then think about when you add all that up, what you are scrolling through is the false view of the world is full of people who are just knocking it out of the park all the time.
Right.
And then you know your own life, which is one step forward, two steps back, or I know all the awkward things I said, or the times I had a hard time talking to a friend of mine. I know the pimples that I have, and it is an imbalanced view of the world. And you then are trying to compile who you are against, goodness, a funhouse mirror, a hall of mirrors in a funhouse that is just distortions all over the place. And you're constantly walking around going, which one of those mirrors shows me? And the answer all of us who are mature know is, oh, well, none of them. It's like, well, okay, that's very frightening. Because what you try to do, why one of the easiest summaries of why middle school is so hard is you're changing and you're growing, which means you're literally often your legs are longer today than they were yesterday. That's not easy. You're going to stumble and you're going to feel like an idiot when you fall. And that is applicable to every part of you. And you're trying to figure out some way to begin to appear competent and beautiful and together. And many things are against you. The last thing you need is somebody coming along. You know how in one of the things that happened, I think this probably happened more in elementary school, that you're standing in a line and people would do this thing where they took their knees and just made your knees buckle by hitting your knees with their knees. That's just one more sort of summary of what social media often does. Like, you think you're secure? You're not secure. Imagine, rather than people tapping you on the shoulder all the time, they're doing things like that to you, or other things that happen in middle school, which play up. This is what we do as young people, unfortunately, on our dark side. Things like de-pantsing are known in middle school, and things like making fun of people's physical appearance. Yes, this is what it was already like. But imagine that your inner defenses are being attacked while you're already struggling to establish some sense of who you are.
Yeah, and if your value is determined by how many likes you get,
yep,
then that's a cold world to live in.
Yep.
And what it does is basically take the popular and non-popular kids and just give them another platform for the popular kids to be liked and loved, and for those who aren't popular and ignored to be ignored.
Yeah. Yeah, and what if it never stops? Just like we were talking about earlier. What if it just never stops?
Right. And do you really want to? It doesn't. Again, like, it doesn't bring any. And here's my hatred. I'm someone who enjoys learning in history and these type of things. And am I gonna, if I just was on social media, am I gonna like learn about something that I didn't know about, or am I gonna find an interest in something that I didn't have an interest in? Am I going to discover something new? Very rarely. I think the things in life are simply the same. You discover things by meeting people who have an interest in something, and you ask them questions. You interview them, right? You learn. You read a book on someone who studied something and did research, and they wrote something, and you read it and you learn. You watch a documentary, you watch something like that. That's still the best way to learn. And these social media platforms, you don't learn anything. And even the algorithm just gives you more things that you already agree with. So it doesn't even test your views.
Yeah.
Which, if you're if you're learning, if you're in this apprenticeship of life, is it good for them to just continue to be affirmed in what they state, when honestly what they stated was horribly dumb, ignorant, and irrational? Because that could come back and harm them later on. I mean, we've heard stories of high schoolers and college, athletes who posted something in those ages, and it came back and bit them right later in life. And so that's like, I mean, and there really isn't any mercy. Like, there's no grace if you, and especially this is dealing with race. If you mention a kind of a racial view of something when you were like 16, 17, and you posted it on Twitter or X now, or you posted something else, that stays, and people are able to find stuff, and there's no mercy. There's not like, well, he was 17 and he's an idiot because he's 17. They don't give you that mercy. They go, well, once a racist, always a racist.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, like, that is crazy. But do you want to give your kids that type of platform to say dumb stuff? Because that's what a lot of people do is you give them like a public platform to say dumb stuff. And you need it in some ways. It's different if you say a dumb thing in person and people are able to rebuke you on the spot. Like, hey, I'm going to teach you something. That was ignorant. That was dumb. And you didn't consider the views of others. You didn't consider this or that. Let me teach you something. Social media is it's not a platform for teaching. Yeah. It's a platform for just posting. And here's what I believe is what I think. And for a child, again, like at 16 and beyond, they're growing in their understanding of the world. And they do need mentors. They need teachers. That's why we do what we do. Like we want to shepherd and to teach and to say, hey, you were wrong. I love you, but you're wrong. Here's why you were wrong. But you know what? God loves us, not because we do wrong things, but because he loves us through his son, Jesus Christ, right? So here you go. Like there's repentance and there's forgiveness. That's what you want to be able to teach a child. Social media doesn't provide a platform for that.
Yep.
So there's no maturing whatsoever. It does the opposite. So if what Paul says in Colossians 1:28 is that I labor to make them mature in Christ, if you just say, all right, post all your views and thoughts on social media, well, then there's no maturing. And that's unfortunate because we all need to mature. Yep. And we need, and child, as you said, being a child is hard. It's difficult. You make a lot of mistakes. And you need people to kind of come around you and love you and teach you well. And social media doesn't help with that.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and you need to be around people who say I just love you because you're you, and I accept you.
Yes.
And then, again, in a Christian context, you can go, sins are real, but we can repent of those. And we can then know how this all works. We can know that we should forgive each other and we should be able to rebuild trust, that there is a predictable social context, at the very least is what that gives you there. Whereas people now, a part of this probably that we haven't mentioned is if you are not operating in a broadly Christian context, then there is no predictability to relationships. It is, if I have wronged you once, you may never forgive me. You may never speak to me. Or maybe you will forgive me. Maybe we end up being closer than ever. It's completely unpredictable based upon the thing that is done, based upon the two people. So that a part of how trust is built between people is by guidelines that were pre-established. Yeah. And that's another thing that has changed. So number 3 is, I think, straightforward. Because if we're going to move towards talking about a shared context, the shared context for young people for a long time has been schools. And so he proposes phone-free schools. It's more than just disallowing phones during class. Schools should force kids to lock them away altogether. He says, quote, that is the only way to free up their attention for each other and for their teachers.
Yeah, I think that's valid. Again, why would a kid need a phone in school? Do they really need to text their parents? Right. They can talk to their friends at school. So, and they, obviously a teacher has some type of device maybe it's probably a cell phone. If there's ever an issue, they need to call out of the room. Right. So again, like there's just I don't understand the argument of why they're needed in a school setting. I mean, especially when you want kids to be focused on what they're learning, but you give them a phone so they can be, who are already have attention like deficit issues, and you're gonna say like, and come on, let's be honest, we've been in school a lot of our lives. Not every lecture is all that enjoyable to listen to, right? I mean, you're just kind of like listening, and as the teacher drones on. But like the last thing you want to do is give a child who's bored a phone to just escape into. Right. There's plenty of, and I think this is a part of it. Phones in some way protect people from being bored, right? And so we've solved all the boredom problems. We'll give you a phone, and you have access to so many things. I mean, you have access to Disney Plus. Yeah. You have access to your cable TV. I mean, everything's right there on your phone. So you don't ever have to be bored. We will, you never have to feel boredom. It's important to be bored because when you're bored at times, you tend to kind of contemplate.
There's a
Reflect.
different part of you that comes alive. Yeah, we've
You
been
do.
doing sort of experiments in boredom is another way to think about what we've been doing. And I think that as we've explored this space, we've all learned that, wow, I can get real bored of things that I thought would just be continually interesting
Sure.
to me. And we don't need to keep doing experiments in giving ourselves the stuff that is our single current moment of, say, the lowest common denominator of attention. Like my kids can talk to me about Minecraft endlessly, and it's just like, look, kids have always been into things that are of no eternal significance, as all of us are. But that does not mean we should make those the centerpiece of our lives, or that we should give them some inroad into our life to go, you want to see another video that says 21 more facts about Minecraft that you still don't know? These, all of us. I remember the moment I knew this was a big problem, when entertainment had turned a corner. Very great, speaking of lecturers, one of my favorite teachers of all time at the Bible college that I went to, Dr. Stephen Wilson, was giving a lecture. And I think one of my favorite educational moments is remembering he's the first person who ever told me about Masada and about the standoff that the Jews made, and then the kind of the conclusions they came to and how that whole story ended. And he just told this 45-minute, just enrapturing story about what happened there. But I remember another day him saying, I was just flipping through the channels the other day, and then I wasn't planning on watching the History Channel or anything else to take my time, but then I went, ooh, D-Day, and then I turned around and I went, 2 hours burned up right there. And in this moment, I just remember thinking, oh no, if it can get him, it can get any of us.
Yeah.
If he can lose 2 hours in an instant, we all better wake up. And we do. We have to wake up to this reality that to think it is improper that some situation, it's like, well, it's crazy to think that you wouldn't have your phone in that situation. It's like, no, I think we need to think about our total social context, where we go and what we do, and whether or not we need to take a phone with us into that, whether it is a smartphone or whether it is even a text and call only phone, because we've lived with this idea that's like, well, somebody might need to text me about something important. It's like, yes, and also somebody might need to text you to ask if you bought 2 boxes of Raisin Bran or 1.
Yeah.
It's not that important.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of those kinds of moments,
And this generation is graduating college, going into the workforce, and they are now, we talked about, work, rest, balance. Well, there's no such thing as rest, work, balance when you have a cell phone, and you can be on any Zoom call at any moment. You can be on any text stream that's talking about business matters or work-related matters. You can get that PDF and you can read it and then give your thoughts on it, at a drop of a hat. And actually people's expectations on, hey, by the way, like, I know you can access that right now. Why haven't you accessed it? And give me your feedback. Because I'm not working. But you have a generation who has been constantly connected. Mm-hmm. So, like, how are they possibly going to have work-rest balance? There's no such thing. And if they have anxiety, they may fear that if they don't respond to their boss, that boss will fire them because they didn't respond at their whim.
Sure.
Right. So, so therefore you don't get any sleep because you're constantly working. You're constantly, available to be involved in a conversation about some matter. And you're like, well, we have work hours. Can that not wait till work? Well, no. I mean, everything has to happen now. Like, why not just do it now? Let's talk about it now. Let's do input now. Let's get a decision now. Let's not wait. Let's do it now. It's like, well, it can wait till tomorrow, right? Tomorrow's Tuesday. Tuesday's work day. We go to work at 8:30. We can talk about it at 8:30. Why can't we do that? Well, could you do it now? Why can't you just do it now? And so you're creating this dynamic where, kids are then growing up in a world where they're constantly connected, and then they're entering into a workforce where they think that, well, I should be able, I guess I could respond. I mean, why wouldn't I respond? I mean, I have my phone here. I mean, I can connect. I can do this. Why wouldn't I do it? And, I should probably do it. It probably will be good for me. I mean, if I do this, then my boss will like me more because I'm one who has no boundaries. And, that will be good for me. Maybe I'll get that promotion I'm wanting, or maybe I'll get that pay raise because I'm this guy who's constantly available. I'm constantly working.
Right.
And your boss is like, yeah, you're good at what you do. You're constantly responding. I can send you a message at any time and you're going to respond.
Right.
And we see that as a positive. And we see that as a positive, as a good thing. And it's like, whoa, that's bad.
Yeah.
It's just feeding into this issue. So, again, I think taking the phones out of the school, not providing, helping them understand, like, all right, I'm focused. It's deep work. I'm focused at this time for this period of time. When I get back home, I can pull out my phone. I can get on YouTube and see what videos for 30 minutes. And you balance your life this way. And if you can teach a child to do that at 17, what are they going to be like when they're 25, 26?
Yep.
They're going to be quite healthy. And actually, they'll be more productive in work because they actually are able to create these balances.
Yeah.
So,
all right, why don't you take number 4?
So we got this unsupervised play and childhood independence. Let your kids learn to develop social skills, overcome anxiety, and become self-governing young adults naturally. Haidt suggests give them room to try, fail, and learn from it, which we talked a lot about.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's I think of all of
the key word there is failure. I heard a football coach say this. Yeah, you don't want to waste your failures.
Oh, good.
Meaning that you don't learn when you win.
Yeah.
You learn when you lose.
Yeah.
So what says the point, like, if you're always afraid to fail, then you'll never learn.
Yeah.
I'm a big snow skier, and people who don't get any better don't fall because they're afraid to fall.
Sure. And
so you have to be willing to be able to fall to learn how to get better and to go faster. And it's the same with if a parent is so protective of them from failing, then you are really stunting their growth.
Yeah. I want to call forward an impulse that is there in parents, and it's one that is often in the background, and that is, to whatever degree you can, let your kids sort it out. This is, to some degree, calling forward dads. I would label it more of a dad impulse to see conflict happening. Say, like, my backyard is shared with our neighbors, and our neighbor kids are very close in age, so our kids play together a lot. And I've tried to tell myself, all right, if there's some kind of conflict, or if there's something that you maybe kind of go, I wish they weren't doing that. There are moments where you need to even tell yourself, I want to wait and let them sort as many things out as they can, and not just constantly trying to jump in the middle of everything that they're doing, because there are going to be plenty of times in their life when I am not within visual range. And if they don't have any skills to sort things out for themselves, I'm not preparing them to face the world. I'm preparing them for a world where I can say, I will never leave your side. I will always stand there beside of you, and never let anybody say something that hurts your feelings. Never let anybody do anything that might hurt you. Never let you do a dangerous thing at all. I won't let you swing a baseball bat.
Right.
I won't let you be near vehicles, automobiles, where people get hurt all the time. We all care for our children, but we cannot act as if, one, there is no danger in our world, and we can't act as if risk is always bad.
Right.
Risk is a meaningful category, but risk is involved in most situations where, hey, you got to be cautious, but also you've got to be bold. The anxiety has a lot of opposites. The most important one is courage. Right. Courage, as we know, is the virtue that enables all the other virtues. If you cannot train yourself and your kids and all the people around you that you care about to go, certain things are worth fighting for, certain things are worth risking for, then you're missing out on what is fundamental to life, which is some things are worth me giving my life for. So risk is a basic part of what it is to live in a world that is where you are a limited being, but then certainly in a world that is fallen and broken. And so that's where we are, is we have given ourselves technologies to can assess risk. And then we say, wow, turns out there's a lot of dangerous, complex, difficult things out there. Yes, it does. What that calls for, though, is you're going to have to go forward. You're going to have to push your way forward, and you have to let your kids learn.
Mm-hmm.
You have to let your kids struggle. And there, it's like, okay, well, this all seems difficult. It's like, well, yeah, you just have to think a little broader than just the moment that you see them in, though. There are times where the answer is, yeah, we can talk more about that when things are quieter and it's just me and them, and we can sort through the whole thing, how it started, how it proceeded, how it ended. There are moments where you should let them fall, scrape their knee,
Yeah.
get up, brush it off,
Yeah.
and even hold back as you see, oh gosh, is he going to break down and cry right here? And be pleased as you see they brush that knee off and they go, I've scraped my knee before and it hurts every time, but I'm going to keep on going. We know those are coming. It's just we have to encourage each other. And there's even a whole section we have coming. It's like, well, how can I begin to gain these skills? You are not to develop this on your own. This is not something you don't have to figure out human nature and then train yourself to be the perfect parent. That is not the answer. But this principle is huge, that unsupervised play is fundamental to what it means to be a kid, riding your bike around the neighborhood, learning to watch out for cars. Some of these things, if it is able to be done in your neighborhood, you need to be asking, okay, how can I let my kids branch out? How can I prepare them to face a world where they have to be courageous people?
Yeah, I wonder. I was going to ask a question. I wonder if some things is a byproduct of preaching and teaching that tends to overemphasize the darkness of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And overemphasize preaching that says, oh, the world is just getting worse and worse and worse. The world's just getting so bad. You can't even, do this. You can't do that anymore. And it's of developing this certain tone that presents the world as so evil and so dark that in some ways we have to just guard ourselves constantly guarding. You never know, like this neighbor down next door, you don't know like what's going on here. You may be trying to influence your kids to smoke cigarettes or something like that, even though you've never seen them smoke a cigarette. And but you have this like it's almost like you're being built to think this way constantly, and you're always just trying to guard your children from every influence.
Yep.
The only influence they're going to get is my influence.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want them to have influence. So what you do is you kind of like become like a kind of a nomadic family, that you live in the world. You have a house in this neighborhood, but you've kind of closed yourself off. And I think there's a tendency for pastors to preach this constantly, right? You're just kind of presenting this, the world is so dark, the world is so dark, the world is so dark, that it still becomes very effective. But I think there's some doctrinal issues of humans are still created in the image of God. Yes, they sin. Yes, the world has fallen, but humans are still created in the image of God. And it doesn't seem like anywhere in Scripture that Paul makes this statement of never go outside your home.
Right.
The world's going to influence you. I think what Paul tends to say is the world is crooked, but be lights in it. He always flips it and says the Holy Spirit in you is far more influential than you think. And I think that in some ways, preachers need to and pastors need to state that helpfully and go, yes, the world has fallen, and it is as we see in Scripture, it's against the Lord.
Yeah.
However, you're influential. Like there's a power in the world that you have, and I just don't think that's balanced well. And I think it does.
No, I agree.
I
think that way too often we fall into some sort of bunker mentality.
Yes.
And the simplest explanation for why that's wrong is, I will build my church and the gates of hell won't prevail against it. That the church is the offensive force.
It is.
And that the darkness will be defeated.
Right.
And that we have at present all the gifts, and we have God with us to defeat that darkness. Will we take some licks along the way? Yes.
Yes.
And so we have to say that.
Right.
But still yet, we should never feel as if in any age, and to know church history is to go, oh my goodness, how can we be so bold?
Yeah.
Every weapon that has ever been used against the church, not only have these what look like the strongest weapons failed, the persecution of Christians in Rome drove the spread of the church as people saw, against all odds,
Right.
Christians who said, why would I turn away from Jesus? You have nothing to offer me.
Right.
You crucified Jesus and he came back from
Right.
the dead, and I hear you threatening that you're going to crucify me too. Our problems are different in their sort, but this is the challenge that the church faces in our times, to deal with the problems that we have. But we cannot lose that fundamental principle that you're pointing to, which is we are the offensive force. We
Right.
cannot be governed
Right.
by fear,
Right.
and we cannot look at this world and go, yeah, they're all plotting against
Angel
you.
Robinson.
Yeah, there are evil forces, but goodness, speaking of another scripture that is really pertinent to our times, our enemies are not flesh and blood. They are powers and principalities and spiritual forces of darkness in the heavenly realms. That is what is identified as our enemy. And so then we can operate and push forward. We have the gifts. We have the Holy Spirit, and we have the church to depend on, so that we can go forward in this. And that's a great place to transition. And what I like to do, I'll throw out, you're about to hear some broad, vague spiritualist language. And this is pretty new for Jonathan Haidt to land here, especially this sort of, like you said earlier, new agey.
Yeah.
And so as a result, I just want to throw them out and say, he points to solutions that I think he's just begun to think about. And as a result, I don't think they're all that helpful. But at the same time, he is identifying some needs that, frankly, we as Christians can say, well, good. As he's now spent, most of his academic career trying to get to the bottom of, okay, as we have changed, how can we keep some of the good and get rid of some of what is harmful to us? He seems like what he's arrived at is, wow, the harmful is growing rapidly. And so I'm going to prescribe much broader solutions. And so here are his 6 practices that he says would lead to, quote, beautiful actions, end quote. There's your first vague statement. He says, 1, shared sacredness, which is participating in any group that is organized for a moral, charitable, or spiritual purpose. Number 2, embodiment, which could be any physical ritual, from eating together to doing sports to praying. Number 3, stillness, silence, and focus. This could be a meditation practice, but really quietness of any kind. Number 4, self-transcendence, which is about sacrificing for a cause larger than your own, from donations to volunteer work. Number 5, less judgment, more forgiveness. Whether you take inspiration from Jesus, the Tao Te Ching, or the Torah, learn to be slow to anger, quick to forgive. Number 6, find awe in nature. Spend time outside, whether it's forest bathing, breathing in salty sea air, or a walk across an impressive university campus. Nature makes us feel connected in a way nothing else can. This one, I laugh because I've listened, and as I'm sure you have, to Jonathan Haidt talk quite a bit. And he's a very grounded, he's sort of like an old-style secular speaker. I can't even imagine. I can't hear him in his voice, him saying, forest bathing and breathing in salty sea air. He is not the kind of guy.
He's an old school academic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's not his typical vibe right there. So from a Christian perspective, where do we begin as we look at these kinds of things?
I think he's got a pretty good start, I would be honest. The language is vague, but he's not a Christian, so I'm going to give him that. But I think he's on the right track, though. I do think, the shared sacredness, there's, and I think this is where, and the unfortunate thing is, sometimes being a part of a charitable or moral group could have some damages on you, depending on what that group stands for. I mean, you're thinking like Black Lives Matter or something like that, which, was a bit destructive, in a lot of ways. And you can have a lot of hatred towards other people, so that can build its own anxiety, So again, like what is that group that you're going to be a part of? Even the shared sacredness, it's like, well, what is sacred? Is if you're speaking like out of a religious group or a church related group. And I do think like there is power in, for someone who is wanting to be less anxious, I think that's where doctrine comes in and learning about God. Because I think there's a lot of strength and comfort in that dive into who is God,
Right.
and what is my relationship with God. And you think of like one of my favorite things to do in the church is to take the Lord's Supper, which is a very sacred thing to do, right? And there's a lot of not only like the Lord has asked us to do this often, and so as a Christian who's been redeemed by Christ, who is a sinner, and taking that bread and drinking that cup, it speaks to my salvation that God has initiated in my life. But also, like there's a communal involvement in that and participation in that, where we're all doing this together. There's a lot of power in that, to know that I'm not alone.
Right.
God is with me, and these people are with me.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot of significance and power that really does help a person. I think it helps a child too, to know that that these adults believe in God. They believe that God is with them. They believe they're not just coming from nothing and going to nothing, or that it's all up to them to make their life work,
Yeah.
right? And so therefore, I love the Psalms where David says, like, even though like these forces are around me who want to kill me, I can still sleep because I know that I trust in the promises of the Lord. He promised that I would be king. So even though it doesn't seem like that's going to happen, it seems like Saul is going to kill me, I do trust in the Lord's promises. And so therefore my faith in the Lord helps me to sleep.
Yeah.
So it gets into that anxiety of someone who should be afraid, but isn't afraid because he trusts in God and trusts in his promises.
Yeah. One way I would shift this is to just say, consider Bible study, prayer, discipleship, and community as a great place to start as far as, okay, well, what does Christianity propose rather than the 6 things that you're talking about? Well, Christianity, I mean, answers these questions, and not just by saying, hey, find some puzzle piece that fits those spaces you're finding in yourself. No, what you will do is, unfortunately, as you move to spiritual things, there are all kinds of harmful practices you can pick up if you're not careful in answer to meaning. You want meaning in your life. Yeah, I found meaning in owning dogs. It's like, well, guess what? There's a limit on that. And it's not just endlessly helpful for you to keep getting dogs.
Right.
There are many ways that can end up being harmful to you and the people around you, because unfortunately, spiritual answers are complex just as like physical answers are complex. You find yourself hungry, the answer is not just, I could probably just eat anything and it'll just turn out fine. It's like, oh no, not consistently over a long period of time. Pretzels won't do it. That's not the answer. And so I would just throw out Bible study, prayer, discipleship, and community. Because, for instance, like what you point to about a shared sacredness is an instinct to go, there are things higher than me.
Yes.
Okay, good.
The heaven actually is real.
Yeah.
Heaven is invaded. I think that's what again, going back to the Lord's Supper, this, not to say that the bread is actually the body of Christ or anything like that, but it's something that God has initiated and said, do this.
Yeah.
Heaven is real. Heaven has come into the world, and God has come.
Really are a part of something new.
The world is open.
and that will continue on forever into the future, and is already happening right now. And you are in that the Bible says that God has set eternity in the hearts of men, that there's something in you that is an eternal longing. And the answer in the gospel is that you can be filled with the Holy Spirit. You can walk in community with other people that literally 1,000 years from now, we believe you can still know those people, and that your relationship, you and God, and with those people with God, can all continually grow starting right now.
Yes.
And not by your own work, but by God who intended all this and who started it all and who carries it all, so that you, little flock, can be a part of something much bigger than yourself, and that it's not dependent on you to be super sharp or you to be super beautiful or you to be super brave. You are known as you are, and you are accepted as you are, but you will not be left as you are. And that is what we need. That's what we're actually longing for.
Yes. And I children, my daughter Maggie is very imaginative. She she loves stories.
Mm-hmm.
And for her to know that there is a world outside of this one.
Mm-hmm.
The world is far more beautiful and open than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think going back to like, it had to have been fascinating to be not just the disciples, but just individuals who interacted with Jesus. It's like, this guy is different. Like, and I think in the sense, like, the world, there is a holy essence to the world. Like, there's something right, and that's not corrupted in any way. And that thing came into the world, and that thing, like, lived and died, and then rose from the dead. The world is far more, just it's open, and I think the world, the view that the world is closed, it is what it is, it's crude. You got to get what is yours, but there's nothing else happening after this.
Yeah.
What does that say to a child? Those stories that you're enchanted by are not real. None of that is real. The world is actually, there's no courage. There's nothing truly matters, but as Nietzsche says, but what is yours? Get what get what is yours.
Will to power. You want,
Yeah.
use, take.
Yeah, and then even some of these TV shows, like, I never watched The Boys, but like the good guys are really bad guys. Like, this world where no one's really good and bad. Everyone's just trying to get what is theirs.
Yeah, there's nothing but self-interest.
Yeah. And I think, what does that tell a child? But Jesus is the character that came and died.
Right.
He came to seek and save the lost.
Yep.
He didn't come to serve himself, but to serve others. And we tell that to kids because we it's true, and we want them to be enchanted.
Yeah.
And full of wonder, because that is our God. I mean, He created this world.
Yep.
And the Lord is mysterious. I mean, look at Revelation; it's very mysterious, and that is a good thing.
Yes.
And I think that that materialistic, kind of fatalistic cynicalness that really has invaded this generation. Mm-hmm. They're anxious because they have come to believe that the world is it's cold and nothing is good in it. And that is it's so sad, it really is. And so I think that is, one of the ways that parents can really, again, teaching them doctrine and scripture, and helping them be enchanted by God and His world.
Yeah, there are things that we ought to be enchanted by. And you mentioned that there are things that it is bad to give yourself to. That is, if you recognize, I am not the center of the universe, the first danger you're going to fall into is, I should give myself to something higher. Not completely. There are many higher purposes than each of us, sure, but that doesn't mean that we're each supposed to be dedicated to every purpose. One thing, when you begin to look out at forces that are at work, there are a lot of them. And even if you narrow it down and say, well, what about like nonprofits and these sort of things? If you are not in a mature place, you will just get hurt by saying, I'll just join that group, whether that group is the United Way or the YMCA or a political,
or a church.
Speaking of one of the dangers of our age, a political group, a political party, or a church. If you don't have the maturity to understand and know yourself well enough to know, this is what the strength that I have, the abilities that I have, these are the weaknesses that I have. That is exactly where something like discipleship, someone walking alongside of you and saying, oh no, this is where you are. What you need right now is to do some of this and some of this. And these are the things that you have a danger in regard to. And these are some of the things that you are developing strength. That is exactly why we have stronger people that walk beside us. And so there are new dangers that we open ourselves up to if we don't understand what we're facing there. But some of these are simpler. We kind of all know we need more stillness and silence. Mm-hmm. And what the Bible tells us then is like, yes, and the number one object of your focus should be the Lord.
Yeah.
The only one who is truly good.
Yeah.
The only one who is truly beautiful. The only one who is really right.
Right.
We all want to feel right all the time, but
right.
He is right.
He is right.
And you then can come to sanity, not just you'll feel better. The only way to real sanity is to know Him who is true. Then you can begin to look around and go, oh, so everything that I see and experience is to some degree less true? Yes, it is. And I mean, it's overwhelming to think that way if you don't have some North Star.
Correct.
But it is true nonetheless. Yes,
Correct.
unfortunately, folks, everyone you've ever known has failed you
Yes.
to some degree.
Yes.
And that's just, even the ones who didn't want to, yes. But still yet, you can face that reality with the strength that God provides. You can even come to understand and accept the fact that you have real weakness, that you have done real evil, that you can repent of, but that you are not on any sort of road to having all of the abilities. You're not on any sort of road to being just competent in everything, or to being, probably most of us not on the road to being the best at anything we're going to do.
Right.
But we can be ordinary and still be of use, but ultimately our use is not the point. We can be loved and known, and that's what we want. In a world where, I mean, one of the things that we're all having to deal with, for example, if you learn to play an instrument, you think you're pretty good. Yeah, get on any of these platforms and see what they've got to show you about how somebody who might be 20 years younger than you is 10 times the guitar player that you are. And deal with that moment where you go, I'm not what I thought I was. You know what? Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay.
That's all right. That's yep. Well, I want to be a great public speaker. You can be a very good public speaker. You might not be the best.
Yeah.
And that's
right.
okay.
That's okay.
That's okay. You don't have to be
Right.
the best. Nothing in this world is dependent on you being the best. But there is something in you that tells you, oh yeah, but man, it would make me somehow feel a lot better if I was the best. Yeah. You go ask God if he wants you to be the best. Because you know what? If he does, nothing will stop it. But if he doesn't, nothing will make it happen.
Right.
And you'll be okay.
You'll be okay. Yeah. I like the finding awe in nature. Mm-hmm. My wife likes to hike, and my daughter likes to be in swimming pools. Like she prefers, to be back at the hotel, and she's, nature doesn't really enchant her the way that our son Lincoln does. He loves like trees and loves like bugs and loves again, and so does and so having children enjoy being outside, right, and being in awe of an insect or being in awe of a frog.
Yeah. Most of the time, the way it's a pretty high term for us, I think, to say awe. But most of the time, what happens is like, oh wow,
yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, very important.
Memphis Zoo is really good, and we go to the zoo quite often, and our kids enjoy seeing the animals, right? And again, these are all creations of God, and me and Lisa went to Switzerland recently, and we went skiing, and people asked like, what was the skiing like in Switzerland? And I said, we skied at the Matterhorn,
Mm-hmm.
And I said the skiing was okay, but it was what you saw while you were skiing that was just you're just in awe of it.
Yeah.
We had the opportunity to fly and see Mount Everest and the Himalayan mountains, and you're just kind of like, wow, that exists. Like that exists in the world. There's a place where you can go to, and the mountains are so tall that it just takes your breath away, right? Yeah. And there's lakes that the water is so blue. Mm-hmm. You're like wondering, like, I've never seen a lake that color before, right? And these places exist, and you go to them and you see them, and you're like, wow, that's. And if you're constantly, again, if a child is constantly in their phones, and they just see a video of it,
right?
They don't actually get to see it, and be in the presence of the awe of God's creation,
right? Yeah, that's a very small window. It's a very small,
and it's so insignificant.
Yeah,
it doesn't bring you the joy. And so, and I know you like video games and things, but it's like, is doing something like actually doing something real.
Yeah.
Is there's a joy that you experience that if you never do that, you're basically saying this was great.
Yeah.
But
I found that, what my heart a lot of times is actually after in terms of video games is, The idea of other worlds is really fascinating.
Yeah.
The idea that there's a lot going on out there and I don't know what it is. And then you tell me
Yes.
stories of like, well, look at this little funny guy and what he's doing in this world that we created. That the idea of other worlds has captivated people for a long time,
Yeah.
but you're not going to find the answer to that desire in the next game ultimately.
You're not. No.
It will also point you out of itself to something higher.
Yes.
And so you got to keep following where it's pointing and not just keep going, oh, probably it lives in that Xbox right there.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't actually. There are things that it's pointing to that are higher. I do want to point, though, that the less judgment, more forgiveness is such too broad of a generalization.
Yes.
And to some degree, he's just right that it's like, yeah, we certainly are too harsh in general.
Which is
often.
like the righteous mind stuff. I mean,
Yes,
those
yeah,
vitamin
and
D
yeah,
from
and
the
that's
book.
that would be one place if you only followed his career of where you would land. But here's the deal: this is so easy to just say, "Oh, that's too broad of a generalization," because it's just like, yeah, I mean, somebody burns down your house. Hey, less judgment, more forgiveness.
Right.
You know, like, okay, no, wait. Obviously, we need to go a whole different direction, or at
Right.
least much more in depth on what's happening with that question there. And again, that is where the Bible helps you in those complexities to go, yes, we are called to forgive, but we are to be as shrewd as serpents and as harmless as doves. You don't just trust anyone.
Yeah.
You don't just trust all the information that is being thrown at you. And in fact, you are here's the deal, either you are the kind of person who is given a high gift in discernment, or you are to attach yourselves consistently to people who can help you. And that is true of all the gifts, that in the church, what we have is you are to serve your purpose and to give others the gift of your own giftedness. Our gifts are not for ourselves. They are, in fact, to serve others. Or then you will also be a beneficiary of all the other gifts.
Correct.
And I'm not just talking about the one person in your church who has the gift of discernment. Oh, no. The Holy Spirit gives to all Christians some measure of all of this, but for our good gives these gifts in varying, unpredictable proportions, and we are able then to walk and to kind of go, wait, so God is training up a group of people who are going to help me to be stronger, but also help me to learn how to depend on Him and them up to such time as God goes, yes, and now you've made it through this broken world, and it just gets better from here.
Yeah, and God, teaching children that God has a kingdom, He has a mission, and the things that are happening in the world are moving in that direction. Helping them understand that, and that the world is just not a bunch of chaotic mess.
Yeah.
This I know parents are parents have a tendency to try to solve problems.
Yeah.
A child has this issue. I need to solve this problem. And they become obsessed with these horizontal issues. It came out, we were teaching a marriage class in our church, and I was stating that, you can almost work on your marriage too much. And you can almost be always looking for the horizontal problems that you forget, like the major primary issue is that there is a God. Mm-hmm. There's a vertical component to your marriage and to your parenting. That there is a God, He is the Lord, He is the Creator, and things are moving into His design, right? And if you can land there, like if you could legitimately land there and say, again, my children have been given to me, but I don't own them. They're not my slaves to do with them as I will. I can't. They belong to the Lord. Like if the Lord wills for them to go, to work in Korea, there's nothing you can do to stop it. Mm-hmm. There isn't.
Right.
Like, as you were saying earlier, like it's just nothing you can't stop it. Mm-hmm. So I think if you can think that way, that these don't belong to me. Mm-hmm. Like I'm just a steward of them. Mm-hmm. So it's not my individual little people, as the video I always thought was funny when you would have these parents go, so these people came from me and I am like their master, right? This kind of viewpoint, like I these are my little soldiers, in my little world. That is not healthy at all. Right. And so if you're like a king who's trying to make your subjects happy, well, then you're going to make decisions like, I'll just give them a phone or just go let them stay up a little bit later. Yeah. Instead to say that I'm to shepherd them. I'm to steward them. I'm to provide them the proper worldview of who they are and what they were created to do. which is to worship the Lord and submit themselves to the Lord, and really submit their passions and dreams and abilities to the Lord. And if you can get a child to understand that at a young age, and really start working that out as they make mistakes, as they sin, as they have a broken heart, like a boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with them, and all these different matters of life, they will get through those situations with that hope that the scriptures promise, that they're not alone, that the Lord is very much present and with them, and the Lord is using them for his glory and praise. And therefore their life actually does have a higher purpose than their own, just what they, having a bunch of money, having a big home, and these type of things that the world says is a value. What a bigger mission of life than to know that the God of the universe is using your life for his purpose and great praise. If a parent can teach them that, and a pastors can teach parents to think that way, I think there's hope, and you don't have to rely on these 6 vague things that a non-believer psychologist scholar states. You can really start, I would say in some ways, being more at peace with being a parent. Because I have a child who's 10. That means they're about to be a teenager soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've heard this, but I've heard from other parents, oh, you just got to wait till they're teenagers. That's when it gets horrible, right?
Yeah.
These things, which I'm not saying they're lying, right? I'm not saying that they're stating mistruth, but what I am stating is even if that's all true, the parenting role doesn't change,
right?
Even if they're not in diapers anymore, and you have to give them the keys to the car. It's the same teaching points and the same mentoring, and the same share of love and grace that you want to show other people. And really teach them that, hey, your life is not your own. It belongs to the Lord. And the Lord is going to give you skills and abilities that you need to mature. And there may be people better at it than you, but the Lord is using it for his purposes. And spend time in prayer and dependence on him, because you're going to do stuff that you are going to regret. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to have to trust that the Lord will forgive you. So...
yeah,
that's pretty much it.
I agree. And in fact, I think we should leave it there. I want to thank you for being on again, Matt. I don't know when we'll get to do this again, but I hope it's soon.
There's probably so many other things I'd want to talk to you right now about. I've been watching the Star Wars show, and I would love to talk to you about. Yeah,
I have no idea, so that one would not go very far.
I want to talk to someone who equally hates it.
Yeah.
But this has been a joy. I really
Absolutely.
look forward to introducing us to my listeners of my podcast at our church, and maybe we can, I was able at my setup to have people call in.
All right.
So it doesn't have to be the last.
Sounds like maybe that'll be the next thing.
Yeah, I know Denton's here. I don't want to invade your territory, but I think you should have me back.
All right.
I should have y'all. That'd be fun. So
Sounds
thanks
for
inviting me.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, this has been Empires of the Future, and we'll see you in the future.